Thank you. Mr. Cheow Hoe is the Government Chief Digital Technology Officer of the Smart Nation and Digital Government Office. He is also the Deputy Chief Executive of the Government Technology Agency of Singapore, also known as GovTech. As the GCDTO, Cheow Hoe oversees the development of the government's digital infrastructure and technology capability, as well as talent development in information and communication technology and smart systems. He also oversees the development of platforms to enable resource sharing and interoperability across government, so as to drive the development and delivery of innovative government digital services for citizens and businesses. In his role as Deputy Chief Executive of GovTech, he oversees multidisciplinary teams that develop and manage key government digital products such as the National Digital Identity. Welcome, Mr. Cheow Hoe.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see people finally. After being locked up for a couple of years, I think we're finally out. So I'm very grateful and privileged to be here today. Thanks to Thoughtworks for getting me to address this very interesting group of people. So I was thinking quite a fair bit about what to talk about, and I know there's so many experts here, so they'll probably do a much better job than I do. So I decided that I'm going to talk a little bit about really the journey that the government went through in terms of building a digital organization. It has been 8 long, painful years, to be very honest. And I hope some of the experience I share will be quite useful to many of you as you kind of take it back to your organization and also reflect on some of the things that happens, right? So without further ado, I call it right, the slides, is the slides going to be on here? I see the slides here, but not, I got to move it, is it? It's not moving. Is the slides going to be on here? Ah, yeah, finally. Yeah. Okay, I call it riding the inflection point because one thing you realize in life is that life is never a straight line. A lot of people think that when you do something, it's either you go up or you go down, but that's not true. Most of the time, we spend our life navigating a set of inflection points. When I first joined the government from the private sector 8 years ago, God knows why 8 years, but I'm still there, is that there was zero engineering capability in the government, zero. So I scoured the entire organization. I found 7 people that could code, which is quite amazing, right? 7 out of like a lot of people. And so we said that, so how do we start this? And we really started small by doing simple things, right? So we put 7 people together. We worked together with very much certain agencies to figure out what their real problems they're trying to solve. And these 7 people actually made a significant impact. All of a sudden, we were pushing out production systems in months, 2, 3 months, 4 months, rather than the government's standard of years. Because you always ask a system integrator, they'll take 5 years to do something, and that's the way it is. So all of a sudden, there was this momentum, but it was painful. Painful because the 7 people couldn't do so much, right? So we started to grow. And with some success comes credibility in the organization. So we started growing. So we were building standalone apps for the first 1 or 2 years. And then by about 2016, 2017, there was a huge challenge to us, which is, yeah, you guys are very smart. You can build some phone apps and some standalone apps. How about the fact that most of our systems needs to connect to a back-end system? Now, that's where the problem starts. You are literally connecting to something antiquated. And my guys, by the time, was about 40 or 50 strong, had a heart attack, right? He said, oh my God, now we're going to deal with, just on the scene that came out of the Thoughtworks video, looks like something from Stranger Things. It's almost like all of a sudden you have to now push through the wall and get past that into a different part of the world. So that was difficult. But, credit to the team, they managed to navigate that. And we built a couple of very interesting systems that was able to connect the front and the back. One of them was this thing called Business Grant. I think some of the people from the teams could be here. And that was a breakthrough for us because we have proven that agile and modern technology is not just about creating a phone app. And I think that was quite important for us. We started with Ruby and Rails, by the way, but we are slowly changing that. And then another big challenge came to us, probably about 2019. It took me 3.5 years to push a cloud policy. You know, before that, government don't use cloud. Cloud was like taboo. It was like, wow, going to use cloud means that it's unsafe, right? So there was this mindset problem. So in about 2018, 2019, we kind of pushed towards coming up with a policy that makes sense to use cloud and a concept of a full stack. That was kind of a very important, again, another very important inflection point. We could have failed badly because there were a lot of resistance to doing something like that. So, but we managed to do that, so we kind of like surmounted another inflection point. Came 2019, 2020, something happened, all of you knew, pandemic. And all of a sudden, people look at us and say, hey, you guys keep telling us how good you are agile, you can do something in 2 months, 1 week. Do it for us, right? So all of a sudden, we were challenged by Ministry of Health, Ministry of Manpower, Ministry of Trade, whatever, to come up with a whole bunch of COVID apps for them. And I think many of you will know we didn't have the time to do it. Most of these things were done in weeks. And it was a very painful time for the organization because the expectations were really unreal. We built Trace together in 4 weeks. We tested it over 3 weeks. So in 7 weeks, we got it live. We built Safe Entry probably in like 3 weeks, right? And we even designed a token, the Trace Together token, in 5 weeks, and we got it live in 2 months. So that's the kind of time frame we're talking about. So again, you know, the challenge was put on the table. We accepted the challenge, and we delivered on that. So now comes the new normal, right? Again, expectation for technology has changed dramatically. So what I'm trying to tell you in this slide is that at every single inflection point brings you to the next plateau, in a sense. But it also can mean that if you don't do it well, you will fail. And that's the nature of any organization we go through today. Whether it's a government, a startup, or a large corporate, that's exactly what everyone goes through. So I wrote there that, you know, it's either you scale up or ship out. Because if you don't scale up and you don't prove the inflection point, you have to ship out somehow. And the stakes are pretty high, if you ask me. Okay, so let me just go through this quickly, right? So if you look at the inflection point, at the top of it is really what we call the beginning of the end of the beginning. Because it started well, everything was small. Small is beautiful. Actually, Skunkworks was really what we did in the beginning, and it pushed a lot of innovation. But, you know, when we started integrating with the back-end system, it's like old people's problem. All of a sudden, you know, instead of a young bunch of people running around, you have to deal with a lot of what you call old people's problem, and that's very painful. But many people give up at that stage, right? And the last thing I want to mention here is that success has many fathers, right? All of a sudden, you know, in the beginning, nobody cares because there's one small bunch of people. All of a sudden, everybody wants to be part of it. Everybody wants to be part of the digital revolution. And trust me, 90% of them don't add value, and it's very painful. So this is what our team had to deal with at the kind of the crest of the inflection point. So the question that many of my guys ask is, why do we ever have to grow up? And sadly, we do have to grow up. The next thing is that when the things start trending downwards a bit, when all these problems comes, people think of it as almost like the beginning of an end, right? Say, oh my God, last time it was so simple, we were doing things nobody cared about, we were given all the liberty to do things. Now, the empire strikes back, because you know why? We are essentially living in a bimodal world, whereby you got a bunch of people like you guys who are just trying to climb up and do something exciting, and then you got a bunch of people who still don't get tech, right? And they become threatened. And when they become threatened, they will put things in place to block you. That's what I mean by The Empire Strikes Back. This is like Star Wars Episode 5 kind of stuff, right? There will be a sense of what we call an organ rejection syndrome. You guys are like the new organs. You're trying to transplant it into a body that is essentially old. There will be some form of organ rejection before the organ gets accepted, basically. And there's a very big danger of what we call the law of averaging downwards. Because if the rest of the organization this way, you get good people like you in there, you average downwards. And you cannot allow that to happen. But, at the end, one good thing is that resistance is quite futile in this day and age. And that's why we were able to then move to the next part, which is the beginning of a new beginning. And that's how the inflection point moves forward. If you do it well, you have a new beginning. You don't do it well, you will fail. And it's really time to say goodbye to, the first part of the inflection point and think that that's going to stay. It's not going to stay. Things have to change. You need to go back to basics to figure out what you need to do to be successful. And I think quite important is that never ever forget why we are here. And for us, most of the time, many of us joined the government because we wanted to do meaningful things. We wanted to help the country become better. And I think that has always got to stay in your mind as you navigate the next inflection point. And as I said, go big or go home. That's quite important. But, the challenges of scaling is quite a scary thing. Many people don't understand the concept between what we call scaling and growing. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. First of all, there's supply limitation, no question. Everybody knows that. I think I talk to Thoughtworks all the time. They're losing people, I'm losing people. Where did they go to? I don't know. Maybe the Stranger Things, I don't know. The technology is just not going to stop moving. All of us are keep learning every day, and I'm glad to be here to learn something new also today. Demand is far outstripping supply by a scale of 5 to 1. So for every demand we have, we can only do one, basically in the government. And the fourth point is the scariest point. Many of our traditional suppliers still do not get it. And we're trying to help them move forward. But this is a slow, painful process, and we've got to be a bit patient, but that's going to be quite important. And unless you build the accelerators of change, you're going to struggle. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So let me go to the next slide. Quick one. In general, if you talk to any startup, it's no different from what we are doing. We need to learn how to scale, not just to grow. Because growth has limitations. You grow in a linear term, you scale in geometric terms. And I think that's one of the key things that kind of prompted us to do this. So when we first started, it was all about headcount growth. If you give me 5 more people, I can do X amount of things. You give me 10 more people, I can do X amount of things. So that's the gray part at the bottom. You grow very linearly. But one of the key things we did very early on was start creating products. Once you create products, you can scale much faster. So NDI is a product, for example, right? Because the product can be used by millions of people without necessarily for me to add another 50 headcounts tomorrow morning. The second thing that's quite important is what I call platform accelerators. So when we started building a common tech stack for the government, building the cloud infrastructure for the government, all of a sudden, you have platform accelerators that allows you to even build things at a much faster pace because you're reusing a lot. And then finally, the ecosystem. Today we don't just rely on ourselves, right? We use SaaS, we rely very much on the ecosystem. That helps you scale even faster. And to us, this is really critical because if you don't do this, you will always grow at 1x, 2x. The crux is like everybody tells you, you need to grow at least 10x. Otherwise, you're not doing your job, basically. So, how do we scale? Let me just give you a couple of lessons that I learned, and hopefully they are relevant to you. Lesson number 1, adopt a reduction mindset. Now, one of the biggest challenges of big organization is that complexity, unnecessary complexity. So first of all, how do you reduce complexity? That's a very important thing. The more you can reduce complexity, the easier it is for you to work. And to me, that's the first biggest challenge that we had. And we spent a lot of time doing that. Second thing is to reduce duplication. the bad thing about government is that they got 50 of everything, right? So for example, if you got a licensing system, there are 80 of them. Why do you need 80 licensing systems? They're all similar. Why can't you build one platform that does licensing for 80 agencies, for example? So duplication is really one of the biggest challenges you get. Third thing, tech debt. All of you understand this term. It's not just about coding tech debt. You're talking about legacy systems. If you don't kill those things and you don't modernize them, you can't scale. It's impossible to scale. So we have been doing a lot of work in actually reducing the tech debt as much as we can too. And finally, toil. We still live in an age of significant amount of toil in either development, in infrastructure, in everything we do. So reducing the toil from day-to-day work is going to be important. So the concept of building a CI/CD platform, using properly DevOps, practicing SRE, for example, for infrastructure, etc., is critical for us. Because without those things, you just cannot scale. So this is all about efficiency and effectiveness, reducing resource utilization, given that we are limited by that. But more important is to really deliver much higher value as you go forward. Okay, it's not moving. Okay, so the next thing, as I mentioned just now very quickly, is that you need to build accelerators. And the products, the platforms, as well as the ecosystem has really helped us accelerate significantly. Today, we don't just rely on system integrators alone to build things. They are still going on. But because of these accelerators, we're able to build things so much faster and to achieve that kind of outcome that we want. So if you look at this, if you go to the Singapore Government Developers Portal, you'll find that now we've got more than 100 products in there, right? That was 0 in the beginning, right? So these products has really helped us reuse and scale very quickly. And we have also started to put our platforms onto the developers portal. So I invite you, if you have a little bit of time, take a look at it and help us improve that as we go along. The other thing is really about building competencies, right? More makers and less checker, very important thing. We are all in a maker economy. But the problem with the government is that a lot of times it's about checking. More guys to check, more audits, etc. So what we try to do is to build the checking into the platform. So in DevOps, for example, the security part has also been built in. So when you run your code into production, a lot of checks are done, and it really improves our process significantly. So more makers, less checker. More experts, less operator. So in our data centers, for example, we have been trying to automate everything so that you don't have literally a few hundred people doing nothing but doing patching and swapping this, basically, right? It's very important. And I hate to say this, but more doers and less managers, right? So we are trying to flatten the organization. Because if you have everybody as a manager, then you realize that nobody's doing anything, right? Actually, managers are quite useless. They don't do anything. They just manage, right? So it's really a lot more doers and less managers. And that's how we flatten the organization more. Because large organizations, including the government, they just like to build hierarchies. And the hierarchy doesn't necessarily lead to better outcomes. In fact, it leads to worse outcomes. So this is quite important for us. As I mentioned before, automate everything, right? So it's about reliability, repeatability, and more importantly, it's predictability. So we do start pushing SRE quite a fair bit within our infrastructure. We have been using cloud significantly and using many of the cloud tools to help us automate many of these things. Because if you don't, what you realize will happen is that you spend so much time on toil. And toil is really very bad for us, right? And this is how we kind of push towards a much more effective way of dealing with tech. And this one is a very important slide, right? Many of you got a disease, including myself. We all like to build. You see the red word there, build? Because all you want to do is build. But there's so much other things beyond that, and nobody wants to do that. And that's where the problem starts. So I realized that when we started building products, etc., many of our engineers only want to build. When it comes to running, ops, governance, scaling, etc. Nobody cares. They just want to build the next thing. But that is not the way. Because if you don't do the entire chain, your product will fail. Right? I got a very crude example. It's almost like having a child. You know, you think the first 9 months is hard? Trust me. It's after that, when the child comes up for the next 18 years, it's a problem, right? And I think that's what many of us underestimate. Because the instinct is not there. The instinct is just to build. So we need different kinds of people in the organization to be able to build the end-to-end. Otherwise, you will fail. And we have failed many times because of this, right? Very enthusiastic engineers who just want to build. And maybe the last 2 slides, I'll just explain a little bit more. I started, you know, the two person here just now was talking about product managers. Yeah. Product managers are important, right? Don't think that they're not important or they're not adding value. The problem with product management also is that most organizations, oh yeah, 2 of you, hi. Many people don't really have a product culture, and they always confuse projects with products. And that's where the problem starts. Many traditional organizations don't understand the concept of product. But you notice that product isn't just about the first part here, which is our conceptualization, design, development, and launch. As I said, this is like having a child. The launch is like when the child is born, and then everybody's very happy and they celebrate. That's what project managers do. After the project goes live, they have a celebration, and then they disappear somewhere, right? But unfortunately, the product managers have to deal with that circle on the right-hand side. And their role is really, really important. And that's why we have been pushing very hard to develop a very strong product management culture within GovTech. And by doing that, what you have done is that I call this what we call the product success culture, because if you don't do this part, your product will not succeed. If people don't use your product, then you're wasting your time, right? So all the other components are just as important. And one last part here that's even more important is, when do you kill a product? Now, one thing I learned about the government is amazing, is that it's difficult to get budget to start something. It's even more difficult to kill something. You know, so we have this, you know, this is like a Game of Thrones, right? You got a lot of walking deads around, yeah? So one day I wrote a slide, and I think I pissed everybody off. I said, the dead must die, right? Which is Game of Thrones. And the reason is because people find it very hard to accept failure. To kill a product means that the product has failed somehow. But it's a very difficult thing for people who have spent their time writing a huge justification and then find that after 2.5 to 3 years, the product has failed. So let's kill it. But the justification to kill a product is probably a lot more than actually even starting a product. But it has to happen. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with a lot of walking deads, which will obviously reduce your resource utilization and kill you as you go forward. So this framework is something that we wrote and we kind of adapted within GovTech itself. And it's quite an important framework, which is not just about development, but it's really about products, which is quite important. So maybe as a last slide, let me just put this quote out there. I talk about inflection point a lot because the reality is that every organization will fail one day, right? Question is how far can we delay that process by surmounting each inflection point that's thrown at us? And trust me, you know that chart, the first chart I show you, there will be more inflection point going forward, right? And it's our job to push that forward, and hopefully it doesn't go into the gray decline that we talk about. So with that, thank you very much and have a great day.